So last night we had the NBA All-Star reserves that were revealed, and of course people are going to make a big deal of it, but before we get into that, let's just go over the people. First, Eastern Conference, we have Jaylen Brown from the Boston Celtics, Donovan Mitchell, Jalen Brunson, Bam Adebayo, Julius Randle, Tyrese Maxey, and Paolo. I was actually surprised about the Paolo pick, so I ain't going to hold you. Paolo was dope as hell. I've already said this before. Donovan Mitchell, in my opinion, should have been a starter. He was a snub, so it was great to see him getting his recognition. Same with Jalen Brunson. Not going to lie to you, though, it feels as if like they kind of got everything right. Is there anybody that they missed? Oh, Trae Young, of course. So Trae, is a ongoing a lot of conversation here about what exactly does it mean and what exactly does it take to be an all-star. So in the Eastern Conference, Trae Young not being an all-star, averaging 27 points, 11 assists, 3 rebounds. Shooting splits aren't the greatest, especially from the field, but is knocking down 37% of his shots. One of the best offensive hubs in the NBA, 27-11 is amazing. Now, granted, they are at the bottom of the Eastern Conference. I think that's probably the biggest reason why they were not able to make the all-star, at least that's something that's the biggest reason why Trae Young was not able to make the all-star game. But I feel like out of everybody who's in there, just to be honest with you guys, Paolo has to be the one that's the most questionable, because I think Tyrese, he deserves it. No, I'm huge on Maxey. I think Maxey deserves it. Maxey's going out there, he's balling, he's hooping, even in games when Joel Embiid isn't there having a career year breakout, he's deserving of an all-star. Bam representing the Miami Heat, because Butler isn't going to be there. A lot of people are going to ask about Randle. 2 New York Knicks players is kind of, but I do love the fact that Jalen Brunson is getting his love and stuff like that. But Paolo in there, except for Trae, I think that's probably the biggest one. But that right there, for the most part, I feel pretty confident about that. They got it right. I think they got it right for the most part. And then on the flip side, Western Conference All-Stars, and this is where a lot more conversation, the snubs, kind of stem from. We have Kawhi Leonard, Anthony Davis, Devin Booker, Anthony Edwards, Stephen Curry, Paul George, and Karl Anthony Towns. Out the gate, Towns being an all-star was the biggest, and I do mean biggest, one that I was thrown aback by, because putting Towns in the all-star game when I don't even believe he's a second best player on the team, I think that's Rudy Gobert. That right there was interesting, but more importantly, I think probably the biggest snubs on both conferences is the fact that we have the Sacramento Kings playoff team out there playing hard, 27-19 as I record this video, one of the best offensive units in the NBA, and they have not one but 2 all-star caliber players in both De'Aaron Fox and Sabonis, and neither one of them made the game. Neither one of them are all-stars this year. I think that's definitely questionable. De'Aaron Fox averaging 27 points, 5 assists, 5.5 assists, 4 rebounds, shooting 47% from the field, 38% from behind the arc. And then Sabonis is giving you 20 and 13. I think he's leading the league in rebounds this year, 62% from the field. Neither one of them not being in the all-star game is certainly cause for a lot of questions. A lot of people are up in arms about this. Breaking news though, however, because both Randle and Joel Embiid, and please get back soon, brothers. Get back healthy soon, bro. We especially Embiid, he's been great this year. But since both of these players have been out, they're not going to be healthy. Embiid is dealing with a knee problem. He's more than likely going to miss the All-Star game because it's right around the corner. And Julius Randle a few games ago dislocated his old arm, so he's going to be out as well. A lot of people are then asking the question, who are going to replace them? We have Trae Young, Jimmy Butler, Porzingis, Jared Allen, and Derek White. Now, I think pretty obvious that Trae Young is going to replace him, but the other selection, I don't know. If they feel it necessary to replace a front court player with another front court player, then that kind of leaves us with Jared Allen, Porzingis, depending on how they view Jimmy Butler, also Jimmy Butler as well. So that will be up for question. I think Jimmy's probably going to be the player that is going to be in that conversation. I see a Toronto Raptor fan in the chat saying Scotty Barnes, but I do believe that Trae Young, even though he didn't make it, even though he is someone that, is a bit questionable what the winning, he's still going to be in there because of the injury. So shout out to Trae Young. And then I think it's going to be interesting to see who gets replaced. Adam Silver picks to replace Julius Randle or Embiid, the other one who's going to get selected. So again, it's just very, very interesting about what exactly it means to be an all-star. Now, before we continue with this, something else that has to be introduced. Shout out to Pascal Siakam. Pascal Siakam also not being an all-star. 22 points, 6.5 rebounds, 5 assists. Pretty good season. Scotty Barnes is another one. Lauri Markkanen not making it this year, despite the fact he had it last season. 24 points, 9 rebounds, 2 assists is another conversation piece as well. I'm going to say this though. For the most part, I feel like they got it right. Shout out to Wembanyama. Shout out to Wembanyama. Now, everyone else is pretty self-explanatory. Pretty self-explanatory, man. But for whatever reason, people got to make things way more complicated than they need to be. So our good friend, ex-ESPN analyst insider Amin, also used to be a lot of front office work out in Phoenix. He had a gripe with another name, but it's not Towns, not Randall. It's actually a top 10 player. Let's see what he had to say.
Why the is Anthony Davis an all-star? Why is Anthony Davis an all-star? Why are the Lakers sending 2 all-stars and the Sacramento Kings are sending 0 all-stars?
Because the 2 all-stars that they're sending are 2 top 10 players. That's why. That's why. Because the 2 all-stars that they're sending are 2 top 10 players. That's why. Pretty simple.
Why? Why? A lot of people are going to point to Karl Anthony Towns. No, he's cool. His team's winning. We always put a premium on winning when it comes to these all-star nods, particularly if it's close. And it's not like Sabonis and Fox would be there. They've been all-stars before. So we've established these are all-star caliber players who are having career years for a team that's winning. Versus Anthony Davis, great player. Your team's not winning. Why is he an all-star?
So this does beg the question about the validity and value of winning in all-star games. And just FYI for people who don't know, that's never necessarily been the difference maker. Unless there has been like undeniably a noticeable gap in the type of player that you are, which in this case there is, because Anthony Davis is a top 10 player in the NBA. I don't really know of in my lifetime the consistency of someone being an all-star based off of wins or loss. Not saying that it's never happened. I mean, we just saw Trae Young not be voted in himself, but I feel as if like I kind of remember DeMarcus Cousins, who was on losing teams pretty consistently being an all-star throughout his time in Sacramento. There's the 4. And also, I want to say, in 2014, when he didn't make an all-star game, who were the all-stars in the West? We had LaMarcus Aldridge, Anthony Davis, Blake Griffin, Dwight Howard, Dirk, Kevin Love. I mean, for the most part, again, if it's close, then I can see it. But majority of the time, if you are really just that talented of a player, then you're going to make the all-star game based off of how talented you are, based off of how you want to be perceived and seen in the NBA. We also have to have a conversation about, like, bro, the reality is that Anthony Davis is a more premier player in the league than Sabonis is, than De'Aaron Fox is. So when you're trying to push product, you're trying to push content, we want to see AD on the floor, not necessarily Domantas Sabonis. But I don't really think that it's that complicated to award a top 10 player in this association with an all-star appearance. YG Nate said Kevin Love was losing. This is 2014. Oh, Kevin Love was losing. He was an all-star. I don't know what y'all want. I don't know. Also, to Amin, Steph is losing. He's an all-star. DeMarcus Cousins, another example. I mean, there's several teams and players and examples of who should or should not be an all-star if you want to take priority of winning. I understand that concept. When we're talking about a top 10 player, I just don't get it. But it's been pretty consistent that a player from a losing team is still going to make an all-star selection. So why Trae Young didn't make it, putting up 27-11, if it's off of just wins and losses, I think that's a bit odd, especially when he is better than Paolo. Like he's noticeably better than he is. I do, however, also understand why people have the concerns for the lack of De'Aaron Fox and Sabonis, but again, I cannot stress this enough. Karl Anthony Towns this season, 23 points, 10 rebounds, 3 assists, shooting the piss out of the ball. 52% from the field, 44% from behind the arc, 87% from the free throw line. He's having a great season. 23-9. That's not enough to justify giving Minnesota not 1 but 2 all-stars. That's not enough. Towns is not a top 10, 15, 20 player. So the fact that you are willing to go down to AD when you know why he's a top 10 player, but not point out Karl Anthony Towns, I think is a bit odd. I think that's really, really odd. If anybody should not be there in the Western Conference, it's Towns. Put De'Aaron Fox in there. Now, this also brought into another conversation, another question. What about expanding the All-Star roster? So, good friend of the show, JJ Redick, had a really good answer. He said we should just expand the rosters to 15 players, 15-man roster. Let's see what we got to say.
When we think of great players from any era, how many All-Star appearances they have on their resume is one of the determining factors in how they are viewed in the history books. An All-Star appearance is meaningful to the player. It's a point of validation. It creates value in their playing career and value for their brand, and it matters when discussing their historical legacy. An All-Star appearance isn't just meaningful to the player. It matters to an organization, a fan base, a city. It matters to the history of the game. And yet it's harder than ever for players to be named an All-Star. Let's go back to that first All-Star game in 1951. Here's a few Hall of Famers that played in that game. The man with the long gray beard, Jim Pollard. Pollard made 4 All-Star appearances in 7 NBA seasons. He never shot over 40% for his career, and his career high average for points was 15.5. Andy Phillip, or Handy Andy, was a great point guard and made 5 All-Star appearances in his career, but only shot over 40% once. New York Knicks legend Dick McGuire made 7 All-Stars. He shot 38% for his career, never averaged double digits in points, and his career high average for assists was 7.6. Different times, different game. I get it. I'm not saying these guys shouldn't be in the Hall of Fame. They absolutely should. Relative to the rest of the league, they were stars. League average field goal percentage didn't exceed 40% until 1960. And as I always say, we should celebrate and acknowledge what players are able to accomplish in their era. Why am I even talking about Dick McGuire or Handy Andy or the man with the long gray beard, Jim Pollard? Because they were all-stars. And there's a chance that a player this season averaging 22 points, 6 assists, 4 rebounds, shooting 50% from 2 and 40% from 3 gets left off the All-Star roster. And that would be a real shame. All-Star appearances are one of the determining factors for Hall of Fame induction. And I strongly believe the NBA should expand the NBA All-Star roster size. We have expanded the league. We have expanded the talent pool. It's time for a few more guys every year to get that stamp of validation.
Okay, let me say this. JJ Redick's point that there is more teams in the NBA, so that's why we should allow more roster selections in contrast to the 60s. Okay, I get that point. However, the whole premise of what he said, and this is what I'm going to say as well, is that everything is all relative. You making the All-Star appearance is relative to the era that you're in. So the truth of the matter is, somebody's always going to get left off because it's all relative. You highlighting and telling me about their numbers in contrast to who they were playing up against proves the point that someone will always be left off. It's all relative. So even if we increase it to 15, someone is still going to get left off because that's how talented the league is. So to add more validity and volition and justification and prestige and honor to giving someone an all-star appearance is to make sure it stays relative. Being an all-star in today's game holds the prestige because there's only 12 selections in each conference. To hold that prestige is to understand that I have to go up against other players who are posting up crazy numbers, and I can still stand out amongst those players as well. That adds the prestige to it. You dropping it down to 15, you're actually doing the opposite of what you're saying, but it's all relative. Jamal Murray is as great as he is. Like, there's a reason why he's not an all-star, because the numbers that he posts up, 21 and 6 with 4 rebounds, those are great numbers, but to put into context how relatively great the league is right now, that someone can put up numbers like that and still not make the All-Star game. That it should add validity to how great the league is. If you open it up and now for that 15th spot, we're adding in Jamal Murray, we're adding in Zion. I mean, damn, what is Kyrie averaging? Kyrie's averaging 25, 5, and 5. That's what he's averaging. So every single time, if you make it more players, you're still leaving somebody off. You're still leaving someone off. I understand what they're saying, but it still doesn't remove the fact that somebody's going to get left off, that someone is not going to be available. And I just think it just shows the level of talent that's in the NBA, that we can have players that don't play in the All-Star game play at a certain level, and they're going to make it. I do, however, believe that there should be at least one selection from the Sacramento Kings that should make it. And I think the player who should be off the list is Karl Anthony Towns, because though he is a number 1 seed, I don't believe that he's even the second best player on this team. I think that's Gobert. But to sit here and to say that we should take off Anthony Davis, a top 10 player in the association, is crazy. And I also don't think that increasing the roster spots to 15 answers it either, because there's still going to be somebody that's left off the list. You got to accept the fact that, the league is just that talented. And when it comes down to it, this is what the All-Stars are going to look like. On the Western Conference, we got Luka, KD, Shea, LeBron, and Jokic. In the East, we have Giannis, Embiid, Tyrese, Hallie, and Tatum. Mind you, no more are we doing the recess style, pick your team team, draft your team type of play. We're going back to East and West. And then the reserves, D-Book, Steph Curry, Anthony Davis, Anthony Edwards, PG, Kawhi, Karl-Anthony Towns. Reserves on the East, Bam, Paolo, Jalen, both Jalen's actually, Jaylen Brown, Jalen Brunson, Tyrese Maxey, Donovan Mitchell, and Julius Randle. I had to reiterate this as well, and I cannot stress this enough. Towns' name looks so off. Yo, Towns' name looks so off. So, yo, let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. If you believe that there is a snub, please let me know down low. Make sure you hit the subscribe button, notification bell. And until next time, I'll see you all later. Peace.